Clara Hawthorne stood on the weathered porch of her family's ranch, the Montana wind tugging at her faded calico dress. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the rolling plains, but its beauty couldn't mask the decay around her. The barn sagged, its roof pocked with holes. The fences leaned, splintered, and broken. The cattle, once the pride of the Hawthorne name, were half-starved, their ribs stark against their hides. Her father's death 6 months ago had left the ranch teetering on ruin, and her mother's frail health and her younger brother's youth offered no help. Creditors circled like vultures, and the bank's final notice sat heavy in her pocket. Pay the debt by month's end, or lose everything. Clara's hands tightened on the porch railing. She was 22, with no suitor, no fortune, and no time. The weight of her family's survival pressed against her chest, suffocating. Then, 2 weeks ago, a letter had arrived from a solicitor in town, a proposal as cold as it was practical. A wealthy landowner, reclusive and unmarried, sought a wife through a proxy marriage. He'd settle the ranch's debts in exchange for a bride. The catch? They'd never meet until the vows were binding. Her mother had wept, begging her to refuse, but Clara saw no other path. She'd signed the papers, her signature trembling, and sent them back. Today, her husband would arrive. The crunch of wagon wheels broke her thoughts. A buckboard creaked up the dusty trail, driven by Mr. Grayson, the solicitor. Beside him sat a man cloaked in shadow, his broad frame hunched under a wide-brimmed hat. Clara's stomach twisted. She smoothed her hair, her heart hammering. What kind of man buys a wife sight unseen? She prayed for kindness, for strength, for anything but cruelty. The wagon stopped, and Grayson tipped his hat. "Miss Clara, your husband, Mr. Silas Kane." The man stepped down, and Clara's breath caught. His face was half hidden by a scarf, but the visible skin was scarred, puckered from burns that twisted across his jaw. His eyes, a piercing gray, met hers briefly before dropping to the ground. He was tall, broad-shouldered, but his coat hung loose, as if he'd lost weight or cared little for appearances. Whispers of the townsfolk flooded her mind. Tales of Silas Kane, the outcast who lived on the hill, shunned after a fire that killed his family and left him marked. They called him cursed, dangerous, a man to avoid at all costs. This is a mistake," Clara stammered, turning to Grayson. I didn't know." Grayson's face hardened. "The marriage is legal, Miss Hawthorne. The debts are paid. Mr. Kane's terms were clear." He handed her a satchel. "His funds, for the ranch. I'll leave you to it." Silas said nothing, his silence heavy, as Grayson drove away. Clara clutched the satchel, her knees weak. She'd married the town's pariah, a man feared by all. Her mother's frail voice called from inside, and her brother, Tommy, peeked through the door, wide-eyed. Clara forced a smile. "Go help Mama, Tommy. I'll be in soon." Silas shifted, his voice low, rough like gravel. "I'll sleep in the barn. Won't trouble you." Clara blinked, startled by his deference. "The barn? But you're—" She stopped. "My husband." The words wouldn't come. "There's a spare room. It's not much, but it's yours." He nodded, grabbing a worn satchel from the wagon. "As you wish." That night, Clara lay awake, the creak of the house mingling with her racing thoughts. Silas Kane. She'd heard the stories. A fire 10 years ago, his parents and sister gone, him emerging from the flames, scarred and broken. Some said he'd started it, others that he was cursed by God. No one spoke to him, traded with him, or ventured near his land. And now he was her husband, bound to her by a vow she couldn't break. Morning brought no relief. Silas was gone before dawn, his boots leaving tracks toward the fields. Clara found him mending a fence, his scarred hands deft with wire and hammer. He worked alone, ignoring the curious stares of the ranch hands who whispered behind his back. Clara approached, her voice tentative. "You don't have to do that. We have men for it." "They're slow," he said, not looking up. "Ranch'll fail if the cattle break free." She bristled at his bluntness, but couldn't argue. The hands were lazy, demoralized by months of unpaid wages. Silas worked through the day, repairing fences, hauling feed, his strength undeniable despite his gaunt frame. By evening, the hands muttered less, their work sharper under his quiet example. Days passed, and a fragile routine formed. Silas kept to himself, eating alone, speaking only when necessary. Clara watched him, torn between fear and curiosity. He was no brute, no monster, yet the town's warnings lingered. Why had he chosen her? Why marry at all? One evening, as she brought him coffee, she found him in the barn, tending a lame horse. His hands, rough and scarred, were gentle, coaxing the animal to stand. "You're good with her," Clara said, surprised. "Had horses before," he replied, his voice softer. "They don't judge." The words stung, and guilt pricked her. She'd judged him, hadn't she? Based on scars, on rumors. "Silas," she said, hesitant, "why did you do this? The marriage? The money?" He paused, his eyes distant. "Needed a purpose. Your ranch was dyin'. Thought I could help." "And what do you get out of it?" she pressed. He looked at her then, his gaze steady. "A chance to not be alone." Her throat tightened. She nodded and left, his words echoing. That night, she dreamed of fire, of a man reaching through flames, his face hidden. Weeks passed, and the ranch stirred to life. Silas's funds bought feed, repaired the barn, hired new hands. Clara's mother smiled again, and Tommy ran through the fields, laughing. But Clara felt the town's eyes on her, their whispers sharp. "Married the devil," they said. "She'll regret it." She ignored them, but doubt gnawed. Who was Silas, really? One night, a storm rolled in, thunder shaking the house. Clara found Silas in the barn, calming the spooked horses. Lightning lit his face, revealing the full extent of his scars, jagged, raw, a map of pain. He caught her staring and turned away. "Ain't pretty," he muttered. "What happened?" she asked, voice soft. "The fire. People talk." His jaw tightened. "Was 18. Tried to save him. Ma, Pa, my sister. Couldn't. Fire took everything. Town blamed me, said I was cursed. Easier to believe that than help." Clara's heart ached. "I'm sorry." "Don't need pity," he said, but his voice cracked. She stepped closer. "It's not pity. It's understanding." He looked at her, surprise flickering in his eyes. For the first time, she saw not the outcast, but a man who'd lost everything and carried the weight alone. The next day, a new threat emerged. A man named Victor Drake arrived, sleek in a tailored suit, his smile cold. He owned the neighboring ranch and had long coveted the Hawthorne land. "Heard you're back on your feet," he said, eyeing Silas, who stood nearby. "Bank says you've paid up, but I've got a claim. Old survey says your fence line's on my land. Move it, or I'll take this to court." Clara's blood ran cold. A lawsuit would drain them, win or lose. "You're lying," she said. Drake smirked. "Prove it." or sell to me now. I'll be generous." Silas stepped forward, his presence looming. "Leave, Drake. You ain't welcome." Drake's eyes narrowed. "The freak speaks. Careful, Kane. Folks don't take kindly to your kind." Clara grabbed Silas's arm, feeling his tension. "We'll fight this," she told Drake. "Get off my land." Drake left, but his threat lingered. That night, Clara pored over her father's old maps, despair creeping in. The survey was ambiguous, Drake's claim plausible. Silas joined her, his scarred hand pointing to a faded line. "This here's the original boundary. Drake's wrong, but he'll bribe the judge. Always does." "Then what do we do?" she asked, voice breaking. "Find proof," he said. "There's a surveyor's log in the county records. I'll get it." "You can't go to town," she said. "They'll—" "I know what they'll do," he cut in. "Don't matter. This is your home." The next day, Silas rode out, his hat low, his scars hidden by the scarf. Clara waited, anxiety gnawing. By dusk, he returned, bloodied, his coat torn. "Got jumped," he said, handing her a leather-bound log. "Drake's men. But this proves your boundary." Clara cleaned his wounds, her hands trembling. "You didn't have to do this." "You're my wife," he said simply. "Ain't letting you lose what's yours." Tears stung her eyes. She saw him clearly now, not the outcast, but a man of quiet courage, his heart as scarred as his face, but fiercely loyal. "Thank you," she whispered. The log secured their claim, and Drake backed off, his bluff called. The ranch thrived, the cattle fattened, the fields green, but Clara's heart shifted most. Silas was no longer a stranger. His quiet humor, his gentle touch with the horses, his steadfast presence, they drew her in. One evening, as they watched the sunset, she took his hand. "Silas, I don't care what the town thinks. I'm glad it's you." He froze, then squeezed her hand, his voice rough. "Never thought I'd hear that." She smiled, leaning against him. "You're my hope, Silas. You always were." The town still whispered, but Clara didn't care. She'd chosen her husband, scars and all, and together they'd saved her home and found each other.